Hello and welcome to Frags and Bear Radio. I'm your host, Xamot, also known as Trevor. Xamot being my gamer handle if you're new to my channel, Frags and Bear Network. Welcome. So this show, if you missed last week and previous shows, we've been on hiatus for a little while. I used to do this show with Russell Michaels. I wanted to do more of a solo show because I really it was a lot of work setting up the old show. It was a lot of work finding articles and everything. So I wanted to do something more off the cuff, improv, informal. I may still do interviews and talk to people and things like that. But right now, I wanted to do a show more positive about geek stuff. We're still going to cover some of the negative, some of the bad things in geekdom. But I do want to cover. I want to show you the things I like rather than so much of the things we don't. It's too easy to share the things that we don't like. So I want to share more of the things that I do enjoy for you. So anyway, this is our second episode. And there's not a ton of news that I really wanted to talk about. Of course, hey, how's it going, John? Glad to see you. Yeah, we're gonna bring the nerd porn. So anyway, this week there was a lot of news out of Blizzard, Activision. An employee came out about some of the discrimination from one of his bosses. They announced that Soldier 76 is gay from Overwatch. If you're not familiar, I don't play Overwatch either, so I only know it because I've seen all the pictures. But good news out of that whole thing, which is actually what I wanted to get to, is good news is Bungie. Which I don't play Destiny, but this is a good thing. Whether you play Destiny or not, this is actually a good thing. Bungie has got the rights back to the Destiny franchise from Blizzard Activision, which is unusual. Small studio getting their rights back to the content that they produce is rare. It doesn't happen a lot in this industry. Usually Microsoft or EA or Activision buys a small developer because they made a really successful game and they wind up closing that studio down or absorbing that studio. Usually the studio's around for a couple more games and then suddenly they vanish and the games are being produced by the company who bought them rather than Bungie or it's happened to tons of companies out there. We all know two or three companies get together and make a game, they get bought by a bigger company, suddenly all that content is owned by the bigger company and the other companies sort of go away. Well, that sort of flipped on its head this week. Bungie got their rights back, which is awesome. It's a great thing. It's good for the industry. It's good for gamers. The more competition we have out there, the more smaller studios working to give us content, the more the big studios have to work to make better content to deliver, because they've got the budget to give us the big games, they've got the budget to give us the amazing content, but sometimes it feels like they're sort of dialing it in because they know we're going to buy it, they know we're going to go out and buy the next Call of Duty or the next Battlefield, or what have you. And the more small companies we have out there making good content, the harder they have to work to get our dollars, which just makes it better for us. It means a better market, a better selection of content and games and things that we can be entertained by. So great news. That's what I wanted to share this week. It is funny that it's happening this way because Blizzard Activision seems to be fighting now with EA for worst company, worst AAA developer, because some of the stuff that's come out with EA Blizzard the last couple of weeks has blown my mind. Because I remember Blizzard when I first got into gaming. Of course, I started with console. I started with Atari and then Nintendo because I'm old. Super Nintendo and so on. But we got into PC gaming in about 93, 94 with SimCity, Ultima Online, or not Ultima Online, Ultima, King's Quest, those types of games were where I started with PC gaming. But soon after I moved away from my parents' house and got my own computer, along came a little game called Diablo, and I was blown away. That was amazing. And Not pay anymore. Yeah, Baldur's Gate on PC, but that came even later than. I mean, it may have came about the same time, but my first exposure to Blizzard, John, was with Diablo and Warcraft 2, and they were great. They were fantastic. And a buddy of mine plays StarCraft. I didn't actually get into StarCraft myself. So that was my first exposure to Blizzard, and I jumped off the Blizzard bandwagon after Diablo 2. I never bought World of Warcraft. I never bought Diablo 3. I bought Warcraft 3, loved it. Diablo 2, I enjoyed it, but I wouldn't call it like Diablo was set the standard for Blizzard games for me. And so I haven't really paid too much attention to what Blizzard's doing. I haven't really been interested in another, World of Warcraft. And that's all they've really been doing. And then when they released the mobile game, the Overwatch issues with the esports league and the fake girl, then this guy comes out talking about discrimination he'd exposed in the office. Yeah, John, I agree. Warcraft 3 was what I loved about Warcraft 3 is Warcraft 2. I really enjoyed Warcraft 2, but it got so hard toward the end that it stopped being fun. And maybe it was just my skill level at the time. I wasn't that great at that type of game, but those last couple of maps in Warcraft 2 were so difficult, and I had to repeat so much stuff, they just weren't fun. Warcraft 3 seemed to do a better job of maintaining that balance of difficulty with the ability to succeed, so that I was able to play all the way through Warcraft 3 and its expansion without feeling that frustration and being stuck and having to repeat maps over and over again. So Warcraft 3 I found to be much more fun. And the story, it was a much better story than Warcraft 2. They put a lot more story into it. So it was great. It was one of the best RTS games I think I've ever played was Warcraft 3. But so with Blizzard this week, they had the guy came out with his account of sexual and racial discrimination on the esports team over at Blizzard Activision, and then the Soldier 76 announcement seems to be calculated is the word I'm going for. What got me with that was not that they announced a character was gay. I don't get it. Overwatch, people love it. It's a shooter. I play Rainbow Six Siege, and the characters in that game have backstories and they have personalities. But after I've read the initial intro when I unlock an operator in Rainbow Six, for the rest of the time, I don't care. I don't care whose sisters stuck in prison. I don't care that I think Thermite was seriously burned on a mission. I don't care. I'm there to shoot at digital images of other people and win maps. Don't care if I don't care who the characters sleep with. I don't care who they're dating. I don't care if they're married or have kids. I don't care. So I'm not sure why people care with Overwatch. People do, whatever. But it does seem pretty calculated and hollow. That I agree, John. I loved the backstory with the Lich King and the Paladins, and the way all that worked out was fantastic over on Warcraft 3. So anyway, that announcement, and then and you can interrupt me anytime. John's been in my streams quite a few times. If you guys are watching the live stream, ask questions. Don't feel bad if I'm rambling and you throw a question in there. I'm going to try to interact with the chat, definitely, and that goes for all my shows and all my streams. Oh, where was I? I lose my train of thought when I do stuff like that, but that's okay because that's why I'm here. Share our love of geek stuff, even if geek stuff means going off on tangents about other stuff. So they have that. Then it's announced that Bungie's separating, or Bungie's getting their rights back, which is good news out of this whole Blizzard Activision mess. So that's where I wanted to get to with the first part of the show, was good news in the gaming community. That's all I could see this week. Bungie getting their rights back to Destiny. I think that'll be a good thing for Destiny fans. I think it's a good thing for the industry. It'll be great for Bungie. and hopefully you guys will get some cool new content, because like I said, I don't play it, but I know people who do, and I know people have been dissatisfied with the last run of content from Destiny 2, the expansions and things that they've been doing. Thank you, John. I really appreciate that. That's why I do this. You guys enjoy the streams. That's why I do it. So anyway, our big thing that we like to talk about on Frags and Beer Live is this week's pull list in comic books. I didn't really mention it last week because I did, like I said, this is all, you know, seat in my pants, flying off the cuff, just throwing things out there. But if you guys don't know, or you haven't been following me, about 2 years ago, I dropped Marvel. And that may not sound like a huge thing to some people, but I have been a Marvel collector almost exclusively since, I want to say 92, maybe even 1990. I have upwards of 4,000 comics, right around 4,000 comics, and I would say 95% of those comics are Marvel comics. About 2 years ago, I called it quits. I'd had enough. I think it was 2 years ago. I had enough with Secret Wars. I really got dissatisfied with the way Secret Wars went. And then they started bringing in a lot of writers that felt they had an axe to grind, whether it be with fans or whether it be politically with political opponents. They wanted to work that out or hash that out in the pages of comic books. They wanted to insert their own ideology into the mouths of these characters that they'd been entrusted with. And that's the thing with comic books. A lot of people are like, oh, so what if they want to write the characters the way they want to write it? It's one thing to take your own character, your own creation, your own idea, and go on an exposition about what you think. I mean, I did that with Embers of Liberty, my novel. That's my novel. Those are my characters, my creation, and I can do whatever the hell I want with them. For a Marvel writer, you're entrusted with a character. In some cases, a character that's been around for 60 years, say in the case of Captain America. That character, it has been written in such a way that your readers expect that character to continue to behave in such a way. And so when you're given oh, nice. Yeah, I'd seen that for Neverwinter Nights Enhanced Edition, which is something we may get around to on Monday Night Classics, so stay tuned for that. And I agree, Dark Horse Comics, they've been putting out some good stuff. I don't have any Dark Horse in my current pull list. I have had in the past. Oh, I used to get Conan from them. Then Conan went to Marvel, and I dropped that too. But anyway, so a couple years ago, Marvel went through this change in their writers and in the way they delivered comic books, and also the way their writers and some of their creators interacted with fans, or not so much interacted with, but completely blocked fans on social media. I'm not saying that writers have to talk to everybody that interacts with them or sends messages to them, but for me, I'm a comic book reviewer. I write about comic books. I talk about comic books. I interview people about comic books. That's part of the job I've taken on is more than a hobby. It used to be a hobby, and it's become more than that. And for me to go to a writer of a book on, say, Twitter, say I'm going to ask him a question about the newest book I've read, and find out that I'm blocked and have never even talked to this creator before, that sends a terrible message, not only to fans, but it sends a terrible message to people, to journalists in this industry. And there's not very many of us. You think games journalism is a small niche market. You should see the comic book. If you're not familiar, look up how many comic book journalists there are out there. There's not a whole lot of sites you can go to get comic book news or reviews or anything like that. So when one of us is blocked by a handful of creators at one company, and we've never talked to them before, that sends a terrible message. And whether they say they represent that company or not, Marvel should take notice. If Marvel employs people that just willy-nilly use a blockchain, block all the people, block the people that are trying to give them publicity, block the people that are trying to review their books, Marvel should take notice of that. That is not a very healthy way to have a company interact with their potential customers. So a combination of things, from the writing to the mediocre art to the the way they modified characters beyond that character's expected scope of behavior, you know, making Captain America a Hydra agent, just silly things that they did with these characters, I was done. So I had to do a lot more pull list, and I agree, Conan is fantastic, and I have every issue Dark Horse put out since, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago or whatever, until they stopped, until it went back to Marvel, and I was done. So now we're going to talk about the pull list. I've rambled on about why I left Marvel and why. So you're going to see some comics in my pull list from a lot of different companies, from a lot of, you're going to see some indies. You're going to see some that are self-published or went through a very small press to get published. And you're going to see some creator-owned stuff, because I'm really enjoying what I'm finding from places like Image and Alterna Comics, and in the past Dark Horse and some other indie publishers. I also do get some free stuff every once in a while. Every once in a while, you are going to see a DC or a Marvel comic. I'm going to give it a fair point to talk about those too, because my comic book guy gets incentive books from these companies to give out to his customers, and he always gives me some free books, hoping that I might find something new I want to read. He looks out for me, hoping that, because my pull list got much smaller, so it kind of hurts him, but it hurts me too, because when I dropped Marvel, I dropped a lot of books, and I'm not getting as many as I used to. And so he's trying to help me find new books. So I may come across some. You may see some DC and Marvel, but I don't buy any of. The only DC book I buy is Catwoman. The only Marvel comic I actually put money on is Star Wars for my wife, but I don't even read the stuff. I put them in a pile. She takes care of them, does what she wants to. She's an avid Star Wars comic collector and does not care about Marvel at all. She just wants the Star Wars comic. So anyway, the first one we're going to talk about is, and this is a comic book I actually look for. I love all the books in my list. I really like them all, but there's one book I look forward to every month, and it goes right to the top of the pile as soon as I get it, and I read it immediately. It's called Rose, and it's from Image, and it is by Meredith Finch, is the writer and creator of this comic book, and I'm going to butcher his name, but Ig Guara is the artist. It's a fantasy comic set in a unique world created by Meredith Finch, and being from Image is creator owned, so that means she owns all the rights. I love that. I love the way Image allows these creators to maintain their intellectual property rather than how Marvel or DC handles that. The world is basically, from what I gather so far, there was a group of people called Guardians who had this sort of telepathic bond with great cats, which are in the story called Cats, but it's spelled Khat. So these Guardians, I take it sort of like paladins. That would be your sort of standard fantasy trope translation. They bond with these cats and protect people, and they help save the world. Well, this book is about Rose, who's the last of these Guardians, bonded with, and she finds the last cat in the world, or as far as we know, the last cat. And there's a sorceress, an evil sorceress named Drusilla, who's trying to take over the world. She captures the cat, tries to get Rose to become a bad guy. So really, it's sort of a traditional heroic tale, delivered in a very unique sort of way. I'm going to see if I can give you some art without a ton of glare, but the art is fantastic in every panel. The writing is wonderful. The detail is in each panel is great. So the combination of artist and writer in this book keeps me every month. Like I said, when this comes in, it goes right to the top of my pile. It's the first one I read that week. It's a great book. And yeah, John, great artwork. I have not been disappointed yet with this. We're on the 16th issue now, and I think the first trade paperback is out. Let me double check that before I say that, because I believe, and I may be wrong, I may be entirely wrong. Rose Volume 1. Oh, okay, no, I'm not wrong. There's actually 2 trade paperbacks out. Rose Volume 1 and Volume 2. have already been released. So if you want to pick up the issues and catch up without having to buy back issues, which I don't know, you may be able to find them out there. You can get the trade paperbacks of Rose and catch up. And I agree, John. That's the thing. And there are a couple books in my pull list we'll find where the art and the writing aren't quite in sync, and I'm still on the fence about them. I'm still reading them because I haven't been completely turned off, but there's a couple in my pull list that are still on the bubble about whether I'm going to keep with them or not. Actually, yes, John. The latest Living World story released on Tuesday, and I will be streaming that on Saturday Randomness tomorrow. And from what I hear, the end of this latest living story is really intense. I've heard a lot of people that are either really excited or really like, what the fuck, with the latest episode. So I'm not sure. I haven't played it. I've stayed away from spoilers. I'm going to start streaming it on Saturday. If it goes like every other living story episode, it's going to be a 4-hour. So it'll be 2 hours this Saturday, 2 hours next Saturday to get the whole thing. But yeah, we'll start playing that Saturday. The other book that I have this week is Kick-Ass from Image. And this book, if you remember, this book was started by, and I'm going to forget names here. This book was started a few years back, the original Kick-Ass, by Romita Jr. Am I going to be right? Yeah, John Romita Jr. Started Kick-Ass back in, where's the year when that started? Because I know it's been a while. I can't remember. 2008. 2008 is when John Romita Jr. released Kick-Ass on Image. Originally, it was about Dave Lazevsky was his name, the character who played Kick-Ass. Basically, the world of Kick-Ass, and it's I'm going to say sister book, Hit Girl. In this world, superheroes don't exist. So this is a comic book about the real world where, in the original, a boy is like, what could I do? Like, he's a big fan of comic books. He loves the X-Men and all of that. So in this world, the traditional comic books exist, but superheroes don't. So he's like, oh, what if I become a superhero? And he buys a wetsuit and puts on some work boots, and he goes out there and just starts kicking ass. And it's a very brutal, violent, bloody comic book. It's very adult oriented, not so much as of a sexual nature, but of a violent nature. And it was a great read. The whole first series of Kick-Ass, it spawned a movie, which was actually an entertaining movie, and a second movie, which I can't remember if I saw Kick-Ass 2 or not. But this issue, so Dave gave up the suit at the end of, or either between the two or at the end of the last run, I can't remember. But this one has been picked up by a woman who's a war vet suffering from PTSD, and she starts out trying to make ends meet. She's a waitress. She's a single mom, trying to pay the bills. She gets back from war and doesn't have a lot of money. She's, of course, got trauma from what she suffered overseas. And so she picks up the suit to basically help herself fund her existence. And then she, throughout the story, her story progresses pretty good through this and develops quite well. There's some great character development in the current issues of Kick-Ass. It's a lot of fun to read, and it really goes back to its original roots of being a very violent, in-your-face, bloody comic. And it's a great read. It's a fun read. They did switch. The first half of the Kick-Ass current run was done by Romita Jr. Now it's being done by Steve Niles and Marcello Frusen, is the artist on this book. But while the art style did change, of course, because Romita Jr. is a very distinct artist. Like, you really can't copy him. It's still decent. It's not fantastic. I wouldn't call it amazing art, but it's pretty good. Let me see if I can find you a good example of the panels that you're going to see with Kick-Ass. This one actually has a lot of panels out of the suit. She's got, this one tries to deal with some of the family things that are going on behind the scenes, but also what Kick-Ass is doing in the suit. But yeah, here's sort of some panels. So, you know, not amazing, but still pretty good, still quality art. And so I'm really enjoying this one. I'd heard that, and then I heard what he said after the film, and that sort of turned me off of... I'll probably still watch Kick-Ass 2, but I haven't been running to Netflix to put it on my list or anything. So anyway, then we have Hit Girl, which also came out about the same time that Kick-Ass did. They released the companion issues, Hit Girl. And this one is doing more short arcs. This one was a 4-part issue where she went to Rome and got tangled up with the Catholic, I guess you would say it, the Catholic nun mob. But yeah, this whole story is about this woman that runs a nunnery who's trying to steal expensive artwork, and Hit Girl stops her. This one has also been a fun read, also a very violent read. You know, you've got a 11, 12-year-old girl running around cutting people's heads off, and the art in this one I think is better than Kick-Ass's current art. The storylines are both really good, so I haven't had any real reservations about continuing these two books. I really enjoy them. I'm looking forward to the next Hit Girl mini, because right now this is the 4 of 4, so this ends this current story arc for Hit Girl. Yeah, I think you would enjoy them, John. Both of those books are really good. So far, they've been fantastic. Really true to the original stories and original style of Kick-Ass. Pardon me. All right, so the next one we're going to talk about, we've got 2 indie comics now, and I almost can't call Alterna Comics indie comics anymore, because while Alterna is not nearly the size of, you know, an Image or a Marvel or a Dark Horse, Alterna Comics has really come into their own in the last couple of years, and they've been around for a while. I hadn't heard of them until maybe, I want to say 2014 is when I was exposed to Alterna Comics for the first time, and I found one of their graphic novels at C2E2 in Chicago, and it was called Fubar. And if you've not seen the Fubar series, it was actually done by Fubar Comics, and Alterna picked it up and helped them release it. Through the Woods by Image is one hell of a read. Thank you. I'll take a look into that, John. Let me write that down before I go. Need a pen. Need a pen. Why is there no pens on my desk? There are, but they're all behind my laptop. Through the Woods. I'm always looking for good new stuff to add to my pull list, because, like I said, when I dropped Marvel Comics, that did hurt my comic book guy, because he does everything he does is subscription based. He used to have a store, but he's sort of retired from the brick and mortar style. He's too old to run it that way anymore, but he wanted to keep his customer base around. So basically, we tell him what we want. He orders them from Diamond. We go every week and pick them up. He doesn't maintain back issues anymore. He doesn't order extra stock for shelves or anything like that. So when I dropped Marvel, he lost probably 20 guaranteed issues, 20 guaranteed comics a month from me. And I've slowly been replenishing the number, but I still have 1 week every month where I don't get anything. And that never happened previously. So I want to make sure that if I can find new comics, if they're good comics, I want to make sure that I get them on my list and at least try them out, because that'll help him, and then I'll have new stuff to talk about with you guys and new things to read. So anyway, alternate comics been around for a while now, and Fubar is a great set of books to pick up. And if you like zombie stuff, Fubar and Mother Russia from Alterna Comics, and then Fubar is published by Alterna. What Fubar did is they took, I think the first one I read was about the American Revolution. They basically take a concept and say, what if there were zombies then? So the whole book is stories from the American Revolution with zombies. And they have a Fubar set in the Middle Ages. So it's classic medieval stories like, I can't even, like, I think one of them is one of the King Arthur tales. And then I believe there's a St. George tale. And, you know, they take these classic style tales and they're like, but let's have zombies there. And that's what the Fubar run is. And it's really fun to read. It's very... it's just kind of a fun read. It's not like a really deep read. It's not a really intellectual read. It's really cool art with a really interesting concept and some cool, you know, dialogue thrown into a graphic novel. And that's where I first ran into Alterna, was with Fubar. And then I got, then a friend of mine recommended Mother Russia and The Chair. And from there I expanded into, and as I expanded into Alterna expanded just like they exploded, especially over the last couple of years. They picked up more and more books. They started doing newsprint, which is amazing, and I'll tell you why here in a minute. If you're not old enough to remember newsprint, the comic books we have today that are all bright and shiny, and yeah, John, if you like medieval, I don't have it easily accessible, but if you look up Fubar, Fubar, on Alterna's site, you will see all the different Fubar series that they have over there at Alterna Comics. And one of them is medieval. One of them is set like during World War II. One of them is an American Revolution. They have a lot of different ones. So anyway, Alterna got into newsprint recently too, which what that did was... And this is this week's list is Exilium. Can you see the cover price on that book? $1.50. That's amazing. I remember when I was in high school, the comic books were that cheap. They haven't been that cheap forever. They haven't been that cheap for decades. So when I can buy a comic book, when I can buy several comic books for $1.50, and I love these books, but this book is $4. I can buy 2.5 of these. I could buy almost 3 of these for the price of this one. And that is fantastic. You really can't beat that, especially when you want to try something new. When you want to try something new, it's hard to drop $4 on something you've never read, you don't know anything about. I can drop $1.50 on this. If I don't like it, I'm out $1.50. I'm not out $4. Yeah, John, it's amazing. I mean, some of you guys may not be old enough to remember, but when I first started buying comic books, they were about $1.25, $1.50. I used to buy novels for $3.99. Now, of course, novel prices, and I sell my book too. The prices have gone up, but comic book price, you're talking a 15-minute read, and you spend $4 on it. When you have several of those you pull every month, it's insane how expensive it can get. And yeah, John, even when you got to do that, sometimes the trade paperbacks, you get those too. And they're still less expensive because they're newsprint. So anyway, Exilium, I've been picking up for a couple months now. I did a review of Exilium on Frags and Beer. I also did a review of Rose on Frags and Beer recently too, if you're interested in that. But anyway, the newsprint looks, it looks like an old school comic book. You open it up and there's ads inside, just like we used to see. And then there's the art. Looks really good on newsprint, right? So this story, this book is a science fiction comic book about a world where one race of aliens running away from some bad people that were taking over their planet come to Earth. Some other people who don't like that leave. But then the people who took over the aliens' planet finally come to Earth. And part of the mission, the people defending Earth, the main character's mission is they need more people, they need more soldiers, so they go to try to find the people who left, the people that were exiled or who exiled themselves. We're still not sure how that story goes. They're keeping it very close to the vest in this book so far. This last issue actually deals with, well, she has this one perception about the people who left, and she meets them, and she's like, well, you guys left, and he's like, no, we were kicked out. So it's interesting because they're not giving you, they're dealing with it in a very realistic way, because, you know, especially over a generation or two, events in history will be remembered differently by the two different sides of whatever conflict or argument or debate there was. And so they're dealing with that very realistically, and they're giving you just as much information as the people in the book have, rather than giving you, oh, this is exactly what happened. They're letting you learn it through the eyes of the characters, which is awesome. The three main characters are great in this book. There's a lot of good banter. They actually feel like they're friends. They actually feel like they know each other, have known each other for a while. They're a military unit, so that makes sense. They pick on each other. Their conversation is very normal, very natural, which you don't find all the time with good with some writing. And the art's great. The art is, again, it's not the most amazing art I've seen, but it is good. Looks good on newsprint. The technology stuff, because it's science fiction, so when you run into science fiction comics, sometimes things get lost in the clutter because they want to science-y everything up. They want to make everything look complicated and futuristic. The artist doesn't really do that here. There's not a ton of technobabble in the dialogue either, which can be good. I mean, some people like that hard sci-fi feel of like Star Trek, but it can interrupt the flow of reading. Like, that kind of stuff is okay in a Star Trek episode where you're watching it on TV and you're not actually reading it. But when you're reading a book, and I've read some Star Trek books, when you're reading a book, if there's a ton of technobabble in there, it can be very distracting from the narrative, because you're trying to wrap your head around these words that you're completely unfamiliar with. So they don't do a lot of that in this book. Makes it a good book to read. It's very fun. This is the third issue in a 6-issue series. And that's the other thing I like about Image and Alterna and some of the other books I read. And one of the reasons I don't feel as bad about leaving Marvel. And I'll explain. So with Marvel, Captain America, for example, or let's take Wolverine. Wolverine, my favorite Marvel character of all time. He's been around since 75, 76, when X-Men, Giant Size X-Men #1 released. He's been around a while, but you know, in real terms, he's 30, 40, 50 years old, and he doesn't age. I get that. But his teammates, who are also, some of them older, Scott Summers, been around since 62, right? 62. He's 40, 50, 60 years old, and he looks 30. They never end. Those comic books just keep going. So you have Wolverine, who I have literally seen shot into the sun, right? But he comes back. He's been killed. He comes back. He's been dismembered. He comes back. When you read a book like that, and you know the character can't die, they're not going to kill him, the series isn't going to end, you don't have a sense of danger. You don't have a sense of caring. Like, who cares? Like, well, oh, Wolverine is in danger. Who cares? He's not going to die. And even when they killed him, and this is really what pissed me off, my favorite character of all time dies. Death of Wolverine was a fantastic series. The series that followed that, the repercussions of the death of Wolverine, how his friends, how Colossus and Nightcrawler and all of those characters dealt with his death, were great books. It was a wonderful arc overall. So Wolverine is dead. He is sealed in adamantium. He can't get out. He's dead. He's gone. Then they bring in Laura, which was fine with. X-23 puts on the suit. She's going to become Wolverine. That seemed like a really natural way for her character to progress. Wolverine, as far as anyone's concerned, he was her father. She was his clone, but he was the closest thing to a father that she had. So it made sense. It was an interesting way to take that character. And then they bring in Old Man Logan when they did the Secret Wars thing and they had the dimensions clashing. Yeah, John, I highly recommend The Death of Wolverine. It's a fantastic series. So they bring in Old Man Logan. Okay, it's an alternate dimension. It's Marvel. Of course they did. You know, we have, at the time, we had 3 Jean Greys running around. And then it was announced, and this is after I dropped Marvel, it was announced that they're bringing Wolverine back, the Wolverine, who was sealed in adamantium and who was dead. So again, we're back to, who cares? Wolverine can't die. So who cares if he's in, he's in a fight? He's in a fight with Omega Red this week. So he can't die. Nothing's going to happen to him. He's going to be back next week. And even if he does die, he's going to be back next month or next year. So who cares? So my point is, what I'm really liking about shifting away from Marvel to Image and alternate comics is this is 6 issues. I do not know if there's going to be more after these 6 issues are done. The main characters in this book are all in danger. And it feels like they're really in danger because this is a 6-issue book. Issue 6, they could all die for all I know. I don't know, because this is not a Marvel comic. It's not a DC comic. This is not a 70-year-old Batman who's never going to die. So I like that. Same thing with Image. You know, Image runs, they're usually short runs. Dark Horse is kind of the same way. I loved Lady Killer from Dark Horse. 2 6-issue runs. 2 of them. That was it. So the whole time I was thinking she could die. She could die in the next issue. You don't get that with the big mainstream comics. Because why would you when they keep their characters around forever? All right, so the last one we're going to talk about, and this is a very indie. It was put out by Antarctic Press, but it was started as a Kickstarter, as an indie book. I say Kickstarter, it might have been an Indigo. I don't know. It was crowdfunded. That's the term I'm looking for. But what I'm talking about is Rags. So it's hard to see with the glare on the cover, but Rags is the comic we're talking about here, and this is the 3rd issue of this series. I picked this up from I didn't get it through the crowdfunding, so I don't have the unedited versions, which sure, it might be nice, but it's okay. I don't need to see her nipples to get what's going on here. I'll show you what I mean in a second. So this book is really the core of this book. This is a zombie comic, but at the core of this book, it's about a war veteran dealing with PTSD. As explained by the writers, she's mostly naked or partially clothed through the whole series so far because they wanted to highlight the vulnerability that you feel, how exposed you feel, how raw everything feels when you're dealing with PTSD or when you're dealing with trauma. You feel naked, you feel exposed to the world, you feel like you have no protection. And that was the point. They did catch some flack because, oh, she's naked through the whole book. Well, she's not. She is in some of the book and most of the book. Some issues she's more naked than others. But that's the point. They didn't do it in a sexual nature. They didn't do it to sexy up the book. They had a legitimate story-driven reason to make this character the way she was. And this issue really gets into the PTSD, issue 3. She starts hallucinating at some point. She sees her boyfriend who was killed by zombies early on in the story. It goes into her past and how she dealt with trauma in the service. So this whole book is very much about dealing with trauma, with zombies as sort of the environmental sort of trigger, but the people in the book, the other people that Rakowski meets, also sort of spawn that sense of vulnerability and danger and exposure and all of the themes that they're going with here. The thing that caught my eye with this book, and I'll find a good panel that helps illustrate it, is illustrate it because they're pictures. Most of the book is not in color. It's very black and white, except for some very specific things. Let's see if I can show you this without the glare. As you can see, her hair, you can see her hair, her freckles. That guy's hair, that's her having a hallucination of her dead boyfriend. As all these zombies, she's actually hallucinating that all these zombies are her boyfriend. And her tattoos are colored, and that's it. Like the rest of the book, except for when she's in the service, flashbacks to the service are all in color. But you know, when she's running through the city and being chased by zombies and trying to get out of the street, and it's all very black and white, and it makes a really interesting contrast to the color and the brightness of the reds and the blues of her tattoos and the reds of her hair and things like that. So far the story's really good. It is put out by a veteran and a team of people who are very sensitive to veterans issues, or very supportive of veterans issues. That's the other thing that drew me to this book. Being a veteran myself, I was very interested in seeing how they handled things like that. Now, I'm not a war veteran. I've never fought. I'm just never in combat, so I can't really 100% relate to PTSD that servicemen suffer. But this does sort of help illustrate or help you empathize with how that feels when you sort of think about the exposure and the rawness and the vulnerability, and how everything seems like it's out to get you, and you have no protection from the world. You have no protection from the noise or the danger or any of that. I can sort of get that when I'm reading this book, so it's well worth the read. You can pick it up from any comic shop that gets Diamond. I'm sure they'll probably do a trade paperback at some point. You can also, I think you can still get in on the crowdfunding and get the unedited issues if you want. You'd have to look at their website to see. Maybe they can tell you on Twitter. Those guys are really good to interact with. That's the other thing with these books, and I'll tell you what I've done recently, and I sadly had to do recently. Highly recommend is The Wake. I'll write that one down too, John. I'll take a look at these, and if they catch my eye, I'll add them to my list. The one thing that I had to do recently too, sadly, is vet creators, vet writers, and vet creators. And I hate that I have to do it, but I will, if I'm looking at a new book or I'm interested in a new book, one of the things I'll do is I will go to Twitter and I'll look up the writer, I'll look up the artist, and first I'll see if I'm blocked. If I'm blocked, I walk away. I have never been rude to, I have never been harassing of, and I've never been unwarrantedly critical of a writer or artist for a comic book. I review comics. Sometimes I have to be negative. Sometimes I have to be critical. Never been rude about it. I've never attacked a writer or creator on Twitter. I've never called them names or any of that stuff. So when I find that I'm blocked by one, never interacted with them before, I'm surprised. Well, no longer. I'm not surprised anymore. I know why. I used to be surprised by it, but I'm turned off by it. Why would I want to give you money if you have zero interest in interaction with the person giving you money? I'm not saying I want you to feel like you're obligated to talk to me, but if you're on social media making yourself available to your fans, and somebody who wants to give you money and be a fan has no access to that, that's a turnoff right away, immediately. I'm not going to give you money. I also look for how do they treat other people. I picked up a comic book simply because Blake Northcutt, I saw a post of hers, somebody shared on Twitter, of her talking about how much she appreciates the fans, how much she appreciates the people that read and buy her books. Ding, ding, right there. I saw that post. I followed her on Twitter. I found out what she wrote, and I saw if it caught my interest. I don't just buy comics because I like the people. I buy comics because it caught my interest. I've read Aspen before, and when I saw that she did a run on Aspen, I picked that up, and I was glad I did. And then Executive Assistant Iris looked like a great book. I picked it up. I'm glad I did. I look for that. If I find a writer or a creator and they don't have me blocked, but they're just a jerk, or they're just totally hostile, or they call, they're demeaning, or they look down on fans, done. I walk away. I'm not going to give you money if you treat people like that. So sadly, I've had to start doing that. And so far, this whole rack right here, really good people that I've interacted with. The guys who do Rags, great people. The guys from Alterna, fantastic. Peter Samedi is one of the best guys. I'm going to shout out to him every time. He's one of the best guys on Twitter in the comic industry right now. He's so approachable and personable. He really appreciates everybody who comes to his site, everybody who buys a book. He doesn't get weighed down in the drama or any of that bullshit. And most of the creators that are on the Alterna masthead, great people. I've talked to several of them, interacted with several of them. So far, I've not found any of them to be people I would want to hang out with and have a beer. So that's kind of where I'm at, and that's why you're going to see in the pull list going forward. That's the kind of books you're going to see. We're going to talk about them every month. If I pull new ones in, you're going to see those. I'll try to bring you positive news, things that are good, things that I like, because that's what I want to do with this show. We need to sort of counterbalance the negative out there. And so hopefully you guys find a book you like, or you find a game you like, or some of the news I bring you gives you something else. This is basically going to be my live show that covers the same stuff my website covers, and hopefully bring you more content. Tomorrow, Saturday Randomness, we are going to start the next living story for Guild Wars. That will probably run 2 episodes. Next Monday, this coming Monday, is continuation of Final Fantasy III, the original. And then next Friday, we will pick up again with our next episode of Frags and Beer Radio. So, yeah, and I'm with you, John. I want to support the good people. Done with the drama. I can't do it anymore. I'm too old for it. I got too much other shit to do. So anyway, thank you guys for joining me. Thank you, John, for being in the chat. Anybody else who watched, I really appreciate it. If you're watching the recording, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, let everybody know. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook. You can find my books on Amazon. I don't have the second one here, but Embers of Liberty is my first full-length novel that I released in October. It's available on Amazon worldwide. When Heroes Rise is a short story collection of mine that is out now. I released it last week, and I will have physical copies soon. You can go to trevorbiersbach.com and actually order signed copies if you want in North America or United States. Unfortunately, the shipping is so high to ship a book outside the United States that I would have to charge you like double. I would have to charge you as much for the book as I did shipping, and I can't stomach that. But if you really, really, really want a signed book and you live outside the United States, hit me up on Twitter and we'll talk and we'll figure it out. But I'm warning you, the shipping on books, even to Canada, crazy. So you're not going to like it. So anyway, thank you so much. I hope you do too, John. Hope to see you this weekend. Everybody else, you have a great one. I'll see you next time. You guys take it easy and keep your geek on. Much love.